The Noah story is a fascinating story. It can be viewed from so many different ways, but essentially I think we have to always remember it was an ancient story predating its presence in the Hebrew Scriptures. They had heard these stories of the great flood, and at some point in time, which was around the Babylonian captivity, when they felt that they were at their absolute worst, nothing more could happen. It's at that point in time that the Jewish Scriptures pulled this story of the flood that they've been hearing from all their neighbors into their own Scripture as a symbol for how bad it really can be. And then the key to this whole story lies in the very middle verse of this story. In the middle verse, God remembered Noah. No matter how bad it was, the situation they were in the Babylonian captivity, when the world was flooded, when all life was destroyed, God remembered Noah. And if God would remember Noah, God would remember them. That was the whole reason this story was pulled in at that time. It is not a story of God's vengeance on the people. That was a story told by others that they brought in simply to say, in the worst of times, when you don't think it can be any worse, God is with you. Listen to his voice. Look out for his hand reaching to you. Now, the image of water is such a powerful image. It is an image of destruction. And it is the most powerful, water is the most powerful thing in the world. It will move anything. You know, that it will just, we cannot, with all the genius of engineering, cannot build dams or dikes that can control the Mississippi River. We think we can, but we don't. I don't know how many of you were around in 93, but it was a prime example of how that was not held very well. And they had all the things out there that the Corps of Engineers could put up. No. Water is inexorable. And water can kill. We had a flood here about 4 years after that swept through Kirksville at the north end up there. I mean, the water was carrying cars and trucks. I mean, people almost died. A couple that I know personally almost died. I mean, it is a powerful, destructive force. But in Scripture, it becomes transformed. Water then, with the covenant that is made by God at this time with Noah, that no more will there be water that will destroy, the water of the Exodus as they cross the Red Sea, the water of the Jordan as Jesus is baptized, the water in the story of the woman at the well, and finally perhaps the one scene with water that we don't often remember, as Jesus hung dying from the cross, there poured from his side blood and water. The symbol of what is going on here in a few minutes, the sacrifice of his life, and the symbol of baptism and washing us all clean with this water, with this blood. So water has now been transformed from a deadly enemy to a wonderful friend that cleanses and purifies and blesses. Now we're yanked immediately from the waters of a flood, you might say, by Peter into the Gospel of Peter, or no, the Gospel of Mark, into the desert. And the desert is another deadly place. People die of thirst out there. So just the opposite now. A lack of water becomes the enemy. And Jesus is pulled by the Spirit. You know, as that reflection is, at the beginning said, he's pulled by the Spirit into this desert. He is going to experience the same things, the same type of temptations that you and I face. Now, Mark's gospel, he doesn't elaborate, so we won't either. But you can imagine some of the temptations. And here's a human being in the desert for 40 days. He's fasting, okay? There are wild beasts about him. It's a dangerous thing. But he's ministered to by angels. And I think to myself, what does that mean? What did these angels do for him? Well, they couldn't cut the heat. They couldn't bring him shade, or else he wouldn't be experiencing the desert. They couldn't bring him water or food, break his fast. What they brought him was an ever-deepening reminder of who he was. He was also the Son of God. His spirit was alive within him. And that's how they ministered to him, I think. They reminded him who he was. And that same spirit lives in us. And we're called to remember who we are. We should never forget that the promises that God makes are promises. He's not going to let us go. I promise you, I will be with you. And we have to reach out and we have to claim them. We have to realize this is what God has for us and look for them. God has made promises. I will be there in the hardest times of your life. I will be there when you don't think there's anything else. I will send my angels to minister to you. These two stories, and the way Peter's second reading kind of pulls them together into baptism itself, I think are trying to remind us at the very beginning of this Lenten season that yes, reality is a very difficult thing. It can be very painful. It can be unfair. It can be merciless. But we are never victims. We are children of God. We have a strength that just raises us up and makes us larger than our own life. And we are not one, we are many. We can take care of each other. And that's the call. Each one of us, Christ to each other, all of us together can stand against any evil, any temptation that comes our way.